Cultism in Nigeria did not begin as violence. It started in the early 1950s as a student movement. The pirates' confraternity focused on nationalism, ideas, and campus brotherhood.
Well, but somewhere along the way, along the lines, things changed. By the 1970s and 80s, splinter groups emerged. Buccaneers, Black Axe, Vikings, and what was once ideology turned into intimidation and bloodshed.
I'm sure you're familiar with some of those names, right?
Of course, yes.
If you went through the worlds of the Nigerian universities, you would be familiar with some of these cult groups. Now, from universities, cultism spread to polytechnics, secondary schools, and eventually into communities.
And today, it is no longer a campus problem. More than 40 cult groups operate across the country, with thousands of chapters and strong presence in states like Rivers, Lagos, Edo, Delta, Oyo, Plateau, and Kaduna.
And a little back in history, by the late 1980s, some of these groups had already found their way into secondary schools. Sad, using fear, peer pressure, and extortion to recruit young people.
Sad indeed, and even more troubling is the role of politics and money. In some cases, cult groups are sponsored for thuggery, election violence, or protection, creating a dangerous circle that is hard to break.
Hard to break? Is there a way out? Now, the human cost has been heavy. Thousands of lives lost over the years, and it is not just cult members, but innocent students, traders, residents are caught in the crossfire.
And the damage goes beyond lives. Fear disrupts schools, scares away investment, and of course slow local economies, especially in parts of the Niger Delta and South.
Weak enforcement, illegal arms, drugs, and political protection have allowed these menaces to survive and adapt.
So what began as a student fraternity has evolved into a national security and social problem, which affects education, communities, and the future of young people, Nigerians.
And the big question now seems simple, yet urgent. How do we end the cycle of violence?
That's the conversation we're having this morning.
True. We're looking at prevention, enforcement, and the role of families, schools, communities, and government in all of this. I'm Henry John. Thank you for starting your day with us this Tuesday. This is Good Morning, Nigeria.
I'm Juma Yusuf. Later in the program, we'll also take a close look at the Nigeria-UAE agreement and what it means for both countries. We're live on the network service of the NTA. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA, and to sort of put our conversation which borders on eliminating cultism in Nigeria, let's take this background report put together by Ibrahim Belogunda.
Cultism in Nigeria is a social issue rooted in historical, social and political factors leading to violence, crime and societal division. The eradication of cultism in Nigeria has become a multifaceted challenge requiring comprehensive approach to address. Cultism in Nigeria poses significant challenges to individuals, communities, and the nation as a whole. Cultism undermines trust and cohesion within communities, fostering a climate of fear, discord, and mistrust, with cult activities leading to various forms of crimes, including gang violence, extortion, drug abuse, and violent rituals, which compromise public safety and security. Others are disruption of academic activities leading to school closures, decline in academic performance, and a loss of opportunities for students. Cultism results in significant economic losses, with estimates suggesting that Edo State alone loses over $1 billion in potential investment annually due to violent cult-related activities, inflicting psychological trauma on victims, families, and communities, leading to long-term emotional scars and mental health issues. To address these challenges, experts recommend proper moral education, guidance and counseling, community engagement, law enforcement, rehabilitation and reintegration of former cultists, among others. What are the strategies that could be effective in addressing cultism in Nigeria? How can guidance and counseling services help make informed choices and avoid cult involvement? And how can communities and governments work together to prevent cultism and support those affected by it? These and more are some of the questions guests on Good Morning Nigeria will find answers to as we discuss eliminating cultism in Nigeria.
Many thanks to Ibrahim Belogunda for the background report. Now joining us for the conversation on eliminating cultism in Nigeria, it's a pleasure to introduce Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, Registrar, Bayes University, Abuja. Many thanks for joining us, Prof.
Thank you, my pleasure.
All right, also here for the conversation is Paul Iyambe, youth advocate, social crusader, and author of the book Menace of Cultism. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. And I'd like to begin with you, actually. What inspired you to write the book, on cultism, and why do you think the book will be very important for Nigerian schools, especially, and for young people?
There have been fatalities recorded as a result of cult-related violence in such a disturbing and alarming dimension. Personally, I have lost close associates to cult violence. Ultimately, what inspired me to put this book together is the fact that there have been too many deaths. There have been too many deaths. It breaks my heart when I see youths with vast future potentials being sacrificed on the altar of cult-related violence. That's what inspired me to put the book together. The book ultimately seeks to expose the dangers of cultism and to deter young people from getting involved. Because whether we like it or not, there is a limitless pool where the cult practitioners usually get recruits from. And that is amongst the youths of impressionable age. That is where they carry out their recruit from. And we need to carry this campaign effectively among this very category of youths, because what, of course, encourages cultism is ignorance. So significant of effective result will be determined by how we take this campaign to this very category of people.
All right, away from ignorance, what other factors, lead people into cult groups, or if you like, makes cultism thrive in the country?
Well, one of the factors, of course, because there's no one that doesn't have a reason. They'll always advance some reasons why they are in the cult, you understand? They tell you, they make promises to you. Of course, they embark on evangelism. Those cult practitioners, what they do is that they embark on evangelism. They tell you the seeming benefits you'll be getting when you indulge in cultism. They'll tell you you'll be passing your exams in school. No lecturer will intimidate you. Any kind of girl on campus you want, you get the girl, and all of that. And they are all illusion. They are not real. In fact, it's the opposite that happens at the end of the day. So one of the driving factors is what we call supremacy, tussle for supremacy. Because you want to belong to a cult that seems to have, that people view as the strongest cult. That's where you want to belong to. Some, of course, are as a result of celebrities. Because we've had confession from some cultists who said they belong to a particular cult because of a particular celebrity who is in that cult. So it's the reason why they are in that cult, because the celebrity is like a role model to them. So they believe that by the time they belong to such cults, someday, sometime, they may become like that celebrity. So
it is that deep.
Yes.
Okay, let's bring Prof into this conversation. You're in the system.
Yeah, so
You have students, and who are in school and all that, and you've been watching, you've been seeing how things happen. But cultism, when it started in Nigeria, in the university, it was an intellectual movement then during the Wale Soyinka era when they had, And at what point did they lose it all? They sort of lost control of the ideology that pushed the cultism then.
well, maybe we should first of all put things in context.
Okay.
One is that cultism is coming out of our traditional belief system in secret organizations, secret societies, groups that people mystify. They create a myth around them to give an air, of invincibility and to gain advantage over the other person or the other groups of people in the social system. It's a way of belonging, for people to associate, to become a member of a peer group, so to say, so that you can leverage on it, to succeed. Or, when competition comes in, you can say that you are at the forefront, as the case could be. And of course, like everything we have in everything in human society, there can be a way where things begin to degenerate. Over the years, we have now witnessed a degeneration of the idea behind this grouping system, which is why, first of all, we may not necessarily condemn all groups or label all of them as cult in the first instance, because some of them have benefits, positive benefits, influences that they have been able to impact, on their people. But the degeneration has become a bane of our system. And how did this come about? Just like in every other thing, it came about because of desperation, because our society itself has become really consumeristic, really materialistic, and most of this cult promise you success if you go into some fetish practices. And those successes, like you said, are illusory, like they are just illusory. They become really damaging at the end of the day, not just to the person, but to the society, and they engage in very dangerous practices that can be self-harming, like drugs, alcohol, sleepless nights, meeting in the dead of night when the body probably needs rest. And of course, it gets to the extreme when you see them clashing between themselves, especially among the young ones on the campuses that you mentioned. But maybe we should quickly go back to history. When Wale Soyinka started the pirate confraternity, the idea was not to gain any kind of advantage. The idea was social change. But over the years, it moved away from the idea of the original seven that started the pirate confraternity to other levels of youth taking over. And of course, people also try, some other groups also try to ape and idolize what Soyinka did. Then we had some more other groups. Those other groups had their own ideology that were probably different from the pirate confraternity.
Okay, talking about ideology, the pirate confraternity was founded at the University of Ibadan in 1952. Yeah. And I'm going to read out some of their purpose. They said, fight colonial mentality. Yeah. That's one. Promote intellectualism and human rights and social justice. Reject tribalism and elitism.
That's right.
And they were open, non-violent, ideology driven. So at this stage, cultism was more like student activism instead of criminality.
Yeah, I was actually going to come to that. So yes. When other groups started multiplying, trying to copy what the pirate confraternity did, then of course their own ideology also became different. Then it gained social attention because they were triggering crisis. And the pirate, which is the original one, actually now moved away from campus because they believed that being on campus, youths were probably misbehaving. And since then, it has existed outside the campus because of the deviation from the original ideology. And that's why it is one of the longest reigning or longest living group that we have in Nigeria today. So I think generally it's a matter of perception, it's a matter of context, and of course it's also a matter of how the groups, want to define themselves. But there are different ways in which we can imagine that government can actually deal with it. Not just government, but even the individuals and also the family.
Prof, I'd like you to hold your thoughts there about how we can deal with this.
Okay.
Of course, we'll definitely get to that. Joining us now for the conversation, we also have from our Kaduna studio, Engineer Abdul Audu, FNSC, a Chief Lecturer in the Department of Mechanical Engineering, Kaduna Polytechnic. He's a former Dean of Student Affairs at the Kaduna Polytechnic, Kaduna, former Chairman, Nigerian Society of Engineers, Kaduna branch. He's currently the Director, Entrepreneurship Development Center, Kaduna Polytechnic, and currently the Executive Director of the Igala Education Foundation. Many thanks for joining us, Engineer Audu.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Away from Kaduna now, also for the conversation in our Benin studio, right there in Edo State, is Benga James. He's a media executive, a public affairs analyst. Many thanks for joining us, sir.
Morning, and it's my pleasure. Good morning, Nigeria.
James, I'd like to, hear your thoughts about cultism. When we did the banter earlier, of course, Edo State was mentioned, and of course, in the news, you get to hear stories about, activities of cultists, if you like, cultism in that state. Speak to us. What really fuels cultism? Why do we have both the young and the old involved in this practice that has become deadly?
I listened critically and I watched the build-up and the banter you had with the studio guest right there in Abuja. And they said a couple of things that are also what I was say led to the situation we've had in Edo State before now. Now, most of the times, people are recruited when they were young and at that impressionable age. And we must also establish the fact that when it comes to cultism involves secretive, often violent campus and street-based confraternities. And people are always given promises. And because of the quest for success, I mean, we're in a generation now where people think that is the end that justifies the means. It doesn't matter how you get there. So they are given these fantastic promises, and there's an air of supremacy that is also promised. For example, for the young lads in the school, they are told that they could almost do and get away with anything. They can get their choice of girlfriends, and nobody will be able to challenge them. And that even in their quest for academic qualifications, no lecturer will be able to be an obstruction to them. So when they are given all these promises, which they see as, it facilitates their personal development, helps them achieve a status of touch-not, and maybe also elevate them a bit to a celebrity status. So it becomes attractive for them to join. At the bigger societal level now, we have people struggle with a lot of things in the society. We know what the problems are, but they are not the focus of conversation this morning. So within that context, people are also promised all sorts. That if you join, if you subscribe, most of your sufferings will be ameliorated. You are going to have some social network that will be equivalent to a very huge net worth eventually. And they are promised protection. You are shielded from a number of things. So all of these things become like carrots that are dangled before them. And these are very attractive and oftentimes irresistible carrots. And they just take a bite and they go in. And having gone in, like your speakers in the studio there in Abuja have said, most of the confraternities, the courts, originally, maybe they had good ideas. They had noble ideas. We can go back to the 50s, the 60s, but it will take our time to go down the memory lane and do some bit of history. But again, over time, some of these objectives are no longer what they used to be. Maybe some crook personalities and characters had come in at a certain time, and our society too degenerated and lost values. They have also lost values. They chase mirage largely now. And one of the things they employ as tool to actualize their maybe crooked objective, I must say now, is criminality. That is where the killings came in from. That is where the violence came in from. territorial battles, battles for anything, and before you could say, I mean, Jack, there is people are wielding dangerous weapons, and they are even counting scores. Let me bring you to the Edo situation, the context. And I must open this phase by commending the state governor, Governor Monday Okpebolo, who, after coming in, he became deliberate about, he wasn't shy about it. He was very unpretentious. He didn't want cult and cult-related activities in the state. He was very deliberate, intentional about it, and he went as far as if a particular building or a structure is linked to a cultist or cult-related activities, certainly the state is going to be bringing down that building. A couple of buildings have been brought down. A number of arrests of people who have been linked to cultism and correlated activities arrested. Some are linked are having their days in courts. They are being prosecuted. So with all this chain of activities, seeing a governor who is resolved, determined to tackle it and is tackling it, then I think it has brought in a sense of caution and it is becoming deterrent. And how do I know? How I know is that now, when we are approaching December, the Yuletide season in Benin, before now, in the previous years, we used to become apprehensive, knowing what to expect, and certain areas and neighborhoods became very notorious for the kind of things that will happen. Different cult groups and gangs will start their attacks, will start their violence, and you'll be counting body bags. But this last December was different. Because of the actions that the governor had taken and the effects of such actions that had deterred, that had made maybe cult-related activities, killings, clashes, and violence, had seriously discouraged them. And then maybe some of the protagonists have also been arrested, are facing their own prosecution. And then we saw that for the first time, we had a December that was relatively, in a significant manner, very peaceful. And to boot was the fact that we also had the first ever Edo State Carnival, which was violent-free, which was colorful, and gave people opportunity to really enjoy the season. And the diasporan Edolites who also came in had fun. So what that simply tells you is that something started in Edo State and that thing is working. We are seeing it obviously. Yeah, is that all in all? No. More has to be done. Whatever has been done, whatever gains we have in Edo State now, has to be consolidated upon. And how do you consolidate upon this? Apart from the frontal battle that the state has done, bringing down structures that are linked to cultists, cult-related activities, arresting those that are identified, and making sure that they are having their dates in court, being prosecuted. There is still a lot to be done. We have agencies and agents for social change, for reorientation, for re-engineering of the minds of our young ones. All those agents and agencies have to be engaged. They have to be fully activated. You have the places of worship, you have our schools, and you know, when we go down history lane, we talk about how confraternities started from the university campuses. I tell you that it degenerated so much that even secondary schools have got involved. So it means that the campaign to discourage it should be taken down to even high schools, secondary schools, basic education institutions, to ensure that at that impressionable age, the right message or right messages are preached to the young ones. And let us try to denounce what confraternities and cultism stand for. Let us try to demonize, if we can demonize it, permit me to use that word, because people have to know that when they come to sell the fantasy to them, they should not get carried away. Let them understand that if you listen to the people purveyors of such messages and you enlist, you get recruited into any cult group, this is what might happen to you. We had a lot of young ones growing up with huge potentials to become very great people that will have great impact in society. But they dabbled into cults. And all those dreams and even their lives, sadly, in most cases, were cut short in their prime. So we need to let them know these places of worship too, and down to communities. You know, the typical African society, we will say a child is not brought up by his parents alone, the entire community. So we also use our community leaders and our community platforms to denounce it, to discourage members of community from being swayed to join or to get enlisted into cult groups. We can go on and on. One of the speakers in the studio there in Abuja said something about even they will tell you that some celebrities that we have now are also members of the cult. Let us also engage celebrities. Let celebrities, maybe those who have been involved before and have publicly renounced their earlier involvement, the story is sweeter in their mouth. Let them be engaged to also come and speak to the young ones that there is really nothing to look forward to. There is nothing to entice you about this. It's all lies. It's all mirage. I've been through it. I've done this and that, and I can come out boldly and tell you that I regretted that I ever joined. So you don't go through. You know, sometimes they say experience is the best teacher, but experience is a very harsh teacher. So when you can avoid having those experiences, because it's not everybody that live to tell the stories eventually. So we can go on and on, but I think a good model has started here in Edo State. We've seen the dividends, we've seen the results of this. I commend the governor and I encourage him, like I said, to consolidate on the gains that have been made. Let more inventions be brought into the campaign so that every child that is growing, every child that is a student in a secondary school, in a university, in a polytechnic, or a child that is growing in a community, knows what cultism stands for and see that it doesn't pay at the end of the day. If we are able to do that, I think we would have been able to deal with what would be the menace of cultism. We would have tackled it from the root, and society can only be better for it.
Benga James, thank you so much for your opening comment there, and you sort of offloaded a lot of things, and I like the fact that you use the word fantasy, because there's no reality in cultism actually. You know, I remember growing up reading James Hadley's books. Some of them, that is what really, you know, they read to sort of know how to be a criminal, and most of the stories in James Hadley's then, nobody ever won. They were always caught at the end of the book. And let's bring in Engineer Abdul Audu into this conversation. You've been listening to our guests now in their opening comments telling us about cultism, how it metamorphosed into what it is today. And some people are calling it a national security threat. Let's have your opinion on that.
Thank you. Yes, I've listened to everybody, and there's no need going back over the stories of how cultism started anymore. Let's go to the main topic of the day, which is the issue of eradicating cultism. And it's a national security concern. But it will surprise us here to know that there is no single federal law against cultism in Nigeria. Only a few states have laws directly criminalizing cultism. So once you get a student or a youth caught in cultism, you hardly have any platform upon which to subject him to the justice system in Nigeria. So only Lagos, Edo, Rivers, Enugu, and Akwa Ibom have laws on cultism, criminalizing cultism, where cultism can directly be dealt with in the court of law. What you have in other places in Nigeria are how to deal with outcomes of cult activities. So people can be cultists, and once they have not yet been caught taking part in any criminal activity, you cannot take them to court in other parts of Nigeria, and even by the federal government. So, and there are a lot of causative factors that will lead the youths into joining cult groups. Some out of fantasy, just like my colleague from those states said, from Benin said. Some out of coercion, and some out of necessity. And what is the necessity in it? There are some, our system have a lot of injustices against the young person in Nigeria. And once the youths, at the level of, after adolescent, at the level of adulthood, when they move on to 20, 22, up to 30, once they cannot get justice, normally in the formal system, they try to find a way of getting their justice elsewhere. And then the other guys that have already been involved in cultism in the past are waiting in the wings to bring them into their fold so that they can start giving them that false protection, just like my colleague said. So that protection that they are being promised is one of the allure of the things that go with them into that bring them into the court groups. And again, in the campuses, you now discover that everybody will start forming his own group, depending on who is with him. But it will also be a surprising thing for you to know that there is a lot of political protection for cult groups in Nigeria. Politicians make use of some cult groups, either as their hitmen. When you see some guys performing as is it bodyguards or whatever, bouncers for politicians or at events, some of them are sourced from cult groups, depending on how strong their groups are in that particular environment. So you have, apart from pirates confraternity, which we all know is very popular, we all know much about, we have Black Axe, Eye, the Whites, and so on and so forth. And they have their different insignia, different ways of behavior, and on every campus in Nigeria, these groups want to outdo each other in terms of influence. But going back to the campuses, once the students don't get justice, especially from their teachers, from their administrators of the schools, especially maybe when the student gets involved, let's say, in examination malpractice, or he gets involved into an altercation with a lecturer or a staff, and there is no clearly defined justice system of handling his case, definitely that student will now be a very ready tool for cultists to make use of. And then there are some young people that come to school with stupendous wealth. Cult groups look for them, and they either coerce them or convince them to join them so that they can make use of their wealth. So parents that give their words, I don't know how to put it now, too much money than they need on campus, and inadvertently funding cult groups on campuses. Because they need money to buy guns, they need money to buy weapons and all the rest. And they even need money to sustain their livelihood, the way they behave on campuses. So the society must be ready to tackle this issue of cultism. We must be ready to form laws, especially national laws, not state laws. I've just told you that only a few states in Nigeria have laws against cultism. The federal government, the Nigerian space does not have a law against cultism. So once you get hold of cultists in the school, when I was dean of students, once you get hold of cultists, the highest you can go, take them to police, get them detained, get them warned, and at the end of the day, you still release them back to the society because you have no clear-cut justice system that deals with cultism in Nigeria. But what I do, or what I used to do then, was to see how I can get good counseling for these boys, for the young people. You counsel them, and at the end of the day, many of them, I can tell you today, turned out to be very good citizens. Some of them are playing very great roles in the Nigerian system today. I won't be able to mention names, but I'm just telling you what you can do to bring. So we must look at them to find out why some of them join these groups. And once you can easily bring them out of it, make them your friends, give them good counseling. In our own school here, what we have is we have chaplain and we have a chief imam. They are employed as counselors, guidance counselors, so that they can help us in counseling young people. Somebody talked about religious groups. So we bring them in directly. We don't even wait until they go to the mosque or go to the church before the pastor and the imam in the mosque and the church talk to them. In my own school, there is an imam, there is a chaplain, and there is a reverend father. The chaplain for the Protestants, the reverend father for the Catholics, and the chief imam for the Muslims. They will get them involved a lot in tackling boys who get involved in criminal activities or bad activities, so that counseling can help a lot in changing their mind. Not always, it's not everything that we fight with this thing. Then student union elections, in most cases, up to NANS level, that's National Association of Nigerian Students, or NAPS, National Association of Polytechnic Students. it will surprise you to know that there is no single, at least over the past 15 to 20 years, there has been no single student union election that did not have to contend with, how do we call it now? Opposing cult groups. So the cult that is strongest wins election. And there is no NANS election or NAPS elections that guns or weapons were not freely used. And that's why at the end of the day, you see them coming out with two factions. One faction is somewhere, another faction is somewhere. And you discover that most of the people that come to head student bodies in Nigeria are no longer in school. They're out of school. Ex-students still come to contest election in Nigeria. But this can happen because there is political protection from outside. So you discover that even politicians take interest in what happened on the campuses in terms of student union election. There was a time in my school where to conduct student union election, and we had to disqualify a candidate that was going for president of the SUG because we discovered that we had credible evidence that he was being sponsored by a politician from one of the states. And we frowned at that and disqualified him from contesting because that was a time bomb being set for us in the school. So these are things that happen, but we don't tend to sit down to understand the dynamics of how our youth behave and what they are reacting to. We must understand what they are reacting to. We must take care of them. So there must be good justice system. There must be job creation. The youth must be gainfully engaged. They must be gainfully engaged. We must strengthen the social system in the school. In these days, most schools don't have sports arena for students to participate in sporting activities. Right from secondary school. Somebody mentioned secondary school. Yes. In many secondary schools today. Yes. In many secondary schools today. Yes. In many secondary schools today.
Thank you so much, Engineer Audu. Indeed.
Somebody will set up a secondary school.
Indeed, you have given us so many angles, to this discussion. It's an eye-opener, listening to you about the dimension that cultism has taken. We'd like our viewers to know they can be part of this conversation. We would like to, hear your thoughts, experiences, your recommendations, questions, whatever it is as regards this topic. The number is on the screen, so please send us either SMS or WhatsApp messages. Thank you very much. I'd like to return right here to the studio, and I would like to get to Professor Adeniyi. Listening to Engineer Audu, it shows that this is not just about young people coming together. It's not just about the protection they think they'll get, or if you like, girlfriends or passing their exams. There's political patronage. There's elite protection. And if you like, you may want to think that the financing is coming from that, that part of the whole association. How can we deal with that? Because if you take that out, then you continue to fuel the young ones to go into such groups.
Yeah, I agree with you. My colleagues have been very exhaustive in dimensioning the causes and perhaps to some extent the solution as well. And of course, the element of finance is also very, very critical. But let's not forget that the driving force for cultism is not just for reasons around finance alone. There are also other motives, and we've highlighted it to some extent in our discussion so far. We've talked about the needs, the innate need for individuals to have a sense of belonging, the need to also bond. But again, this kind of bonding and sense of belonging can be fostered in other groups, maybe in a game association, a sports club, for instance, a social club, the ones that are otherwise open. I remember we also had a group which we used to call KEGA those days. I don't know if it still exists on campuses. It's more like a fun group. They call it Palm Wine Drinkers Club. And you see members who are not necessarily, who are obviously teetotalers, but they also belong because they like the songs, the dance, and all of that. So it gives a sense of belonging, a feeling of bonding. And of course, sports associations are also all over the place. The human being naturally wants some level of integration with peer groups, with like minds, as a way of letting off steam, faced with emerging social pressure. Okay, but the one that is problematic is the one that is unfortunately called cultism, because of the element of secrecy, the element of initiation upon entry. Some of them very difficult and harsh, and sometimes leading to death. And of course, you know the trajectory from which politicians operate from. Politicians are often in their need of advantage. Victory at all costs, which speaks again to the kind of political system we are still operating, where people are die-hearted about winning the election. And if you are die-hearted about winning the election, you want to go for broke. One way you can, one device you can use is to get the services of secret organization, otherwise called cultic, who can be menacing, who can be threatening, who can instill fear in the minds of people. And of course, you go to any extent to try to fund them, as the case could be. So that's why, that's where that angle is coming from. But how do we deal with that, to the specific of your question? Of course, again, you can circumscribe it within the conversations we'll be having around the need for us to have a consequential reorientation of our social system, attitudinal change in the way we do things. And that's why sometimes we celebrate democracy. We say we can give credit to our democracy because of longevity, but in terms of character and quality, there's still a problem. There's still a problem because we still have it steeped in bribery, in corruption, in transactional arrangements, in conscience buying, a thing that is not innate, and of course it deprives us of the value, virtue, and cardinal objectives that is otherwise associated with democracy. So all these things can be looked at, or rather should be looked at as a whole, and by the time we begin to have a society that is healthier than we presently have, it will go into the dimension of cultism, which we know what it is meant for, to gain advantage over the other by threatening, by being menacing, and even taking the life of the other person because you are faced with social pressure. And it speaks again to the psychology of individuals. How do you react to pressure? How do you cope with anxiety? The one that is legitimate, that is morally right for us to do is to be religious, to pray to God through any of the dominant religion. Islam is there, Christianity is there. Those ones are legitimate, they are socially acceptable. And they are one way in which we can cope with pressure, cope with anxiety, unforeseen things, our fears, not to contract it or to outsource it to a group, that in itself is susceptible to all kinds of vagaries, as the case could be.
Yeah, I like the fact that Engineer Audu raised the question that, students are there. We also know that there are women also in the cults. They also have their sister cults with the men combined working. And most times when they are arrested, we find out that they are foot soldiers, not the actual sponsors of the cultism. So in Nigeria now, and he also said there's no legislature, there's no law in some states. And so how can we confront the powerful interests behind cultism? Because some of them are already in high places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a very, very important aspect of it. Confronting it is also like saying that, how do we deal with the many problems of our society? How do we deal with the problem of corruption? How do we deal with poor infrastructure? How do we deal with, luxuriating at the expense of the people, And of course, dealing with it is still a question of, being religious about complying with the law, implementing the laws as it is. Yes, I heard the engineer said there's no law on cultism in Nigeria, but I'm also aware that in our constitution, if you belong to a secret society, you are not supposed to be appointed into a public office.
A secret society is different from a cult.
There was a difference. Cultists are usually secret until they come into the open in fighting. So
Have we enforced that?
That's the problem of. That's why I say our laws are often implemented in the breach. We have more than enough laws in this country. Yes, we know society is dynamic. Often laws are supposed to be enacted in reaction to social changes, the emergence of new realities. But even as it is now, if we implement by 20% the laws that we have, and to the letter, our society will be better than it presently is. And cultism can also be included into it, because it's an inordinate behavior. If you associate peacefully, you do not disturb me. there's no problem. If you like, kill yourself, drink alcohol, drink Indian hemp and all of that, as long as it does not prevent me from living my own life, there may not be a problem. But when you now use it, as an advantage over merit over the other person in an undue, unfair, inordinate way, then it becomes problematic. It disrupts the peace of the society.
Prof, there are reports that lecturers in some schools are part of these cult groups. You talked about, we talked about elite. I think it was Engineer Oduda was talking about it. There are reports about cultists who have graduated from universities who were cultists, who are now highly placed, who have remained in such cult groups and continue to steer leadership, or if you like, lead the younger ones in such groups. Why? I mean, with that level of exposure, education, imagine a lecturer or even a doctor, a professor. You're lecturing, you understand the devices and all. But yet you stick with such groups. Why do you think that some people have remained in such groups despite the disadvantages?
And that's what I'm saying, that sometimes it depends on the purpose. Some people just belong to those groups for reasons of association. Maybe they meet once in a while, once in a month. They sing and dance, they drink, they socialize. So it's an avenue to ventilate, to let off social steam. They sit out, and because when you are sitting out, you're not going to necessarily sit out with strangers. You sit out with people that you are bonded with before. And what it also means is that you have left away, if you were into some bad things before, you're no longer doing them on account of maturity. But you want some level of integration away from your routine, just to relieve boredom. It can be the case, in the case of these fellows we are talking about. But where, the purpose is evil, that's where the problem comes from. Or to take inordinate advantage over the other, then of course that's where the law should come in. But is the law coming in? Is the law active in the circumstance? That's the question.
Talking about the law.
We'll be asking.
Talking about the law. Let's get to Benga James now. You have a book. Paul. Yeah, Paul. Paul Inyabe. I've not had time to read your book, but I read a few, pages when I saw it. Speak to us about what you think is the solution. You say you have experience about how other people have lost their lives as a result of this. Is it just about reaching out to the young people, about advocacy, or you think that there are more stiffer penalties, that should be carried out in all of this? So if you like, should it be prosecution, or should it be a way of getting them to repent? Which is a better way out of this?
Well, prosecution, it requires a multi-pronged approach, right? The fight against cultism requires a multi-pronged approach. One of it is punitive measures, right? Stringent laws and enforcement is very necessary to discourage people from participating in cultism. But key among them is aggressive and proactive education of the youth, who are, of course, who serve as a recruitment pool for the cult practitioners, right? That is where the book, The Menace of Cultism, comes in. Everything has been captured in the book, and that has to do with exposing the dangers, because a lot of these impressionable youth, of course, do not know of the dangers of getting into the cult. And even the ones who are practitioners, who know the dangers, will not, of course, tell them that side, that aspect of the cult, right? Because whether you like it or not, the cultism has caused a lot of damage in our society, especially among the youth. It is a breeding ground for all other forms of social vices that is prevalent among young people, right? Ranging from, what's it called? Drug abuse, prostitution, kidnapping, human trafficking, what we call cybercrime, Yahoo. There's very rare before you find a Yahoo person that is not a member of a cult, right? So the cult is an enabler of all of these other forms of social vices. And that's why, for me, I advocate that government should constitute a separate body saddled with the constitutional mandate of dealing with cultism. Because whether we like it or not, cultism is with us. Just like we have drug, just like we have drug NDLE, we should have an agency of government that is tackling cultism.
Well, I've heard people talk about not being aware that they were being, you know, what's the word now? There's a word, initiated into cult groups. Like maybe they just went out to drink with a friend. All of a sudden, they've discovered that, oh, they have joined it. So how do we do with that?
For me, all of this, the characteristic of cult members is captured in that work. My work, the menace of cultism, right? How they behave, how they carry themselves, what, of course, you see some signals, right? The signals you see and know that these people belong to a particular cult. All of that is captured in the work, right? Because now, that from the beginning of this year, just few minutes into the 2026, we recorded the first cult-related killing of a young boy who was returning from crossover service. Right?
Where?
A young boy who was returning
Where
from...
did that happen? I
think in one of the south states. Is underreported. This cult violence and the consequences are usually, these killings are underreported. It's not in the mainstream media, right? But platforms tracking cult-related violence. If we check from the very closest history here, in 2024, recorded 581 deaths. That's reported cases.
Cult-related deaths?
Yes, cult-related deaths. 581. Those are reported cases. In just the year we have just 2025 year, we had almost the same number, 541. Those are reported cases. And we have just started January. We have had over close to 30 people gone already. All of these are not on the mainstream media.
It's quite alarming. It's quite alarming indeed.
So something very drastic has to be done. And that has to do with, that is where I come in, right? That has to do with aggressive and proactive education of this impressionable and susceptible youth.
And I think you need to work in conjunction with the National Orientation Agency to be able to achieve
yes,
that.
we are doing so.
Okay, we'll get back to you. We have some comments from some of our viewers who are watching this program. Let me read some of them before we go to Benin and Kaduna. Let me begin with Nandump Web from Jos. He said, preventing the circle of cultism and violence requires a multifaceted approach involving education, community, law enforcement, and economic empowerment. To break the cycle of recruitment and influence, parents should pay more attention to their children's upbringing and educate them properly on acceptable norms and values. God bless Nigeria. And from Mohammed Awal Musa Afamay from Kano, he said, how can the Nigerian government effectively enforce existing anti-cult laws to act as a deterrent to both students and non-students? And another one wrote, to me, I don't think religion has anything to do with anything cultism. The government should create jobs for the youth, a society where there are companies, there is no cultism. And that's coming from Jonathan from Benin. And Dr. Emmanuel Omachi said, good morning, Nigeria. NTA is doing a good job by bringing on board scholars with adequate knowledge of cultism. Their discussions are apt and speaks clearly to the problem of cultism. My addition is that until Nigerian politicians desist from empowering cultism, it will be difficult to stem the menace. And Austin Ifeanyi Anthony wrote in, he said, eliminating cultism in Nigeria, parents and teachers are to take more responsibilities of creating more intimacy relationships to the younger ones. I believe if the younger ones can be loved and captured, the cultism is a thing that can gradually reduce. Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Benga, you've listened to some of the submission from some of our viewers that have just sent it now. Let's have a comment. You know, it's sort of confusing when people think that young people can just wake up one day, go on a rampage and start killing each other. You know, when the Ministry of Education introduced that they wanted students to be above 16 before they go to the university so that they can be matured enough to make life decisions for themselves, you know, most people said, no, it's not going to happen. We want our children to go to school at 16, 15, finish university before 20, do their masters. But do you think that is right? Do you support that notion that the Federal Minister of Education dished out then? And is unemployment, like some of our viewers have said, the biggest driver, or is the problem itself deeper, like identity, fear, and belonging, peer pressure, and all that?
Listened with keen interest to what every other speaker on this program this morning had said. One thing that stood out for me, and I must also establish, is that to be able to deal or tackle the menace of cultism in Nigeria, multi-pronged approach. It has to be multifaceted. It is very important. Now, where I would like to start from is that the various speakers that have spoken, including myself this morning, have identified what I will call the motivation. I mean, what do the recruiters use to induce people in their enlistment, in their recruitment of would-be members of the different court-related organizations? What the government now needs to do is to demotivate. You know what the motivations are. How do you demotivate? It is very important. The government will have to identify that, okay, these are the motivational factors. These are the carrots that are dangled before these people, and they take a bite and become cult members. Then we have to find a way to demotivate. We have to find a way to let people understand that there is falsehood around the motivations that are being preached by the recruiters. Then the second thing to also look at is, it has also been established by various experts that for most people who indulge in acts of wanton destruction, violence, and killings, they get their high. More often than not, they are high on some illicit substances. So we also need to look at the place of the war against drugs, and to also continue to campaign seriously against the use of drugs amongst the people, especially the young ones. Because when they indulge in those hard substances, they lose their minds. So it's got nothing to do with what age they are at that time. Which takes me to one of the questions you potently asked about the stance of the Minister of Education, who said that who wanted an age limit to the age of entry or entrance into the university. I don't think that does so much about it. If people have been well groomed from home, if people have been well groomed from high school, and they already have their mind formed on certain things, they already have a clear and an unambiguous perception about the issue of cult or cult-related matters. When you are meeting with them and you are trying to enlist them, you are trying to recruit them, and you are dangling the whatever carrots and trying to list out the motivations, they already have a perception. They know how bad it is. When they are also drug-free and they are not high on those substances, then they don't lose their mind. They have their minds operating at the right place, and they will be able to say no when they are supposed to say no. Then the issue of parenting also comes in critical here. It's of critical importance. Because most of the times, what I think has also happened with evolution of society is that parents have lost that place of intimacy most of the times with their children. Because back in the day, my understanding, or I had the privilege of that relationship, most especially with my father. There was hardly anything I would love to do. There was hardly anything I'd be interested in that I didn't discuss with my dad while growing up. Because I think he got it right when it came to forming that bond. A place of where absolute confidence and security. A place of where I could confess anything to him. He would tell me if it was wrong, but he would not condemn me. He would tell me if I was wrong, if I had to apologize, if I had to restitute. He would tell me, but he would also give me a listening ear. He made out time for me. So I think parents should also go back to that place of relationship with their kids. Have time for them. Then let them trust you. Build that confidence. Let them know that even where they have done what is wrong, they can still feel free to come and tell you, to come and confess to you. You will condemn the act, but you won't cancel them. You won't cancel your child. You will say, yes, this thing you have done this time around is bad. And this is how to go about making amendments. This is how to go about making restitutions where necessary. So that place is there. Then people have also spoken about the place of the law. Yes, where we think that the laws are not the laws are not that open or clear on the position of the law on court matters or court-related matters, then such laws in those places have to be reviewed. Where there is an absolute situation of no law, then a deliberate law has to be promulgated to address it. Then where we also have the laws, because most of the times in Nigeria, it's not about the absence of the laws. It's about the political will and the courage to implement the laws. And our state actors have to have that courage. You know, I've come to realize that one of the hallmarks of good governance and good leadership is the ability to make decisions, especially the very tough decisions. Decisions could be pretty tough. There are decisions you will make that will not make you friends. There will be critics that will come at you. But for as long as you know that that decision has been made in the interest of the collective good, then you should have the courage to go ahead with it. Because at the end of the day, the good in that decision will speak for itself. And it will become apparent for all to see that that decision was made in good faith. And
thank you so much, Mr. Benga James. You've made valid points there, especially when you talked about parenting and how, you know, parents should interact with their children. We'll take a break now. When we come back, the conversation continues. Of course, we have more messages. We'll read them. Stay with us. All right, many thanks for staying with us. It's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA, and our topic is eliminating cultism in Nigeria. We have so many messages. I'll read a few. Jimmy already read some. This one. Okay, this one here says cultism in Nigeria can only be eliminated through a balanced approach that combines prevention, enforcement, and rehabilitation. This includes strengthening moral and civic education, addressing youth unemployment and peer pressure, and improving campus and community security. That's from Mohammed Isa in Konto Cafe in Kogi State. Another one says, good morning, sir. I listened to your conversation about cultists. Please, I really need your help. Some cultists are after my family. I'm afraid to tell anybody. I'm in my husband's house, but I once rented a shop inside K2 Market. I think that is where their boss saw me. That's coming from Toyin. That's a woman in distress there. Another one says, eliminating cultism using value reorientation to inform families and community leaders on how to counsel youths against cultism is the way out. Another one says, cultism can only be eradicated when the school authorities come out physically and spiritually, because some lecturers belong to these cult groups. That's from Cletus. Another one says, good morning, I'm Reverend Samuel from Delta State. I listened to the lecturer from Kaduna saying that even the federal government has no law against cultism. Why can't the National Assembly enact or sponsor a bill prohibiting cultism in the country? Now that's the question. Another one says, good morning, NTA. I love this topic. Eliminating cultism in Nigeria requires a multifaceted approach. Some potential strategies include community engagement and outreach programs, education and job creation initiatives, strengthening family and social support structures, encouraging positive role models and mentorship, law enforcement and judicial reforms. That's from Ibrahim Friday Adejo from Bonny Island in River State. And finally, I have, good morning, Nigerians. I am Shehu from Basita in Kwara State. I've indeed learned a lot from the scholars brought to the studio, but my take is that Nigerian politicians need to stop using cultists as bodyguards. Parents, in the other hand, should, from childhood, inculcate the good norms and values in their words. May God bless Nigeria.
Okay, Nyere, before you go to Kaduna, let me read the rest that came in. This one said, concerned citizens across Nigeria are calling on the federal government and relevant security agencies to take urgent and decisive action against cult groups operating within the country. These groups have been linked to violence, intimidation, criminal activities, and the destruction of lives and communities. Their continued presence threatens national security, undermines the rule of law, and creates fear among innocent Nigerians who simply want to live in peace. And Ayuba from Gombe said, good morning, presenters. I appreciate today's topic, eliminating cultism in our society. I think you need to talk about government officials aiding cultism. That's from Dedan, Ayuba, Gombe State. And another one said it will be difficult to eliminate cultism in Nigeria because the people that will fight to eliminate cultism in Nigeria are rooted in it. I'm talking about the law enforcement agents, and some fathers are cult members. The one said, good morning, Nigeria. NT, you're doing a great job. Cultism is a menace that needs all attention. As we have anti-corruption, anti-drugs agency, there's need to have anti-cultism agency urgently in order to check both internal and external forces. Salisu Talle from Kanu. And Ambassador Williams Victor Kade said, on illicit use of drug substances, support war against illicit use of drugs and cultism, from Mutumbiu, Taraba State.
All right, let's get to Kaduna now as we begin to round up this conversation. Engineer Abdul Audu, I know you gave some recommendations earlier, but I'd like to hear, what you think can deal with this issue once and for all in the country.
Thank you. Well, I was trying to rush it up because I know with studios, sometimes you are hurried to quickly close up what you have to say. That's why I was trying to bring everything together all at once. At that time, I spoke first. Everybody have said a lot, and I don't want to be repeating what each guest have said, because we are all going to repeat ourselves, and that's not what we need here. But the recommendations I gave and others have been given are things that should be looked into. Even if the federal government cannot set up an agency, anti-cultism agency, as stated, I think the National Orientation Agency can set up a department to look into this menace and also work with various educational monitoring bodies, so that they can come up with curriculum in civic education that will help young people. And talking about the age limit brought by the Minister of Education for those who want to get into tertiary institution, from my experience, I want to strongly align with the Minister of Education, because we in the school, we know what we face when very tender people, tender children come to school, come to higher institution. We know what they go through, what we face in trying to help them to stabilize. They can easily be swayed. So coming to school at a very young age is also a factor. It helps in getting them off the track, and they go into bad things through peer pressure. So you discover that your tender child, your meek child, your docile-looking child that came to school at a very tender age leaves school and become a very hardened person because of what he has gone through. By the time he goes out of school, even just at 2021, he becomes a very violent person because of the kind of groups he has worked with. Parental care is very important, but I still want to go back to this issue of the people involved. You see, the cultist of yesterday is already in a position today, position of influence today. So most of the times, some of them are watching us now as we are in the studios talking now, and they will just wink at us that these people are just wasting their time, because they know what they gain from it, and they promote these things among the young people. And sometimes it's difficult to get it out. But like I said earlier, some people have repented and they have become very good citizens. Those people are the best that can help. When I was doing student affairs, some of the guys that helped me in tackling cultism in the campus, our campuses, we have a multi-campus institution, were boys who had left cultism. They joined me in fashioning out strategies for tackling cultists in the campus. And they help in giving me their secrets, how they operate, what uniform or what regalia each group wears, and the rest. And it helped a lot. So once you get repentant cultists, my brother there who wrote a book on it will tell you more. You need to bring them together. They help you to form an anti-cult group And because they were in it before, they know all their secrets, all their strategies. They can always tackle themselves. And there are so many things we can do that will help to curtail this. Somebody talked about enforcement. I didn't have to wait for any Nigerian law because on more than 2-3 occasions, you go to you in fact trace them to the point of initiation at the river banks, at sacred places, pack them using DSS, using police. They will only be in detention for 10-15 days, and that is all. They go back. But the best is, the moment they are identified, we don't stay far away from them anymore. We bring them close and try to help. Even I went as far as to use, in the school, I identified NMS. There are students that went to Nigerian military school, but did not go straight into this military, but are in school studying the one course or the other. Form them into groups, ex-boys, because they are disciplined. They help in training my manual group and stuff like that. So they are.
Okay, engineer, you know, as always, time, when we're rounding up, time is just not enough. We have to cut you there so that we come back here to the studio and get the views of our guests before our time runs out. Now, Prof, let's look at the value system that we have in Nigeria now, where sometimes you see parents, if their children are disciplined in school. We saw a video that trended some time back. They went to the school, they were slapping the teacher, they were doing all that.
Yeah.
Are we enablers as parents?
Yeah, indirectly, really. And of course, it can be related to the degeneration of our value system, like rightly identified. And because we prioritize the ego of the individual, we think more about pride. And this is coming again. The offshoot of that is, or the background to that is a preference for materialism. You know, so when you are morbidly concerned about material progress, irrespective of the source, you know, you lose sense of value, sense of reasonability, and sense of judgment, you know. But how do we remedy it? I think we can become much more institutional. You know, if the institutions function well, there are so many institutions that we can use to deal with all the problems we've been talking about. If they function well, better than they presently are, then of course, you know, the pressure on individuals will reduce. And no single person will have the effrontery to confront professionals or people in legitimate duties, like this case between the lecturer and the family member who probably went to slap a lecturer or a teacher, as the case could be. So it's the collapse of institutions. And when we're talking about institutions, we're not looking at them only in the physical sense. It can also be in the soft, you know, intangible sense. In the way we look at regulations, rules, ethics. Where are our ethics? Where are our morals? Where have we lost them? How do we come about, you know, how do we revitalize them? You know, how do we regenerate them? And I'm saying that we can regenerate them, you know, with a conscientious effort driven by government with the support of the people. And of course, we can retrace our step.
Thank you, Prof. Mr. Paul Inyambe, I'd like to hear your final thoughts on this, and I would like you to speak about glorification of violence in music videos, in movies, social media. How do we begin to regulate all of this? How can we, stem this
How can
ugly tide?
celebrities come in to help?
Okay, for celebrities, I think the government can engage the celebrities, possibly persuade them not to be, displaying their cult groups on air. Sometimes they demonstrate their signature greetings while in the public, and they're on record. That's also a motivating factor. Then we can also leverage them using their platforms to educate the youth. They have millions of followers. If we can engage them and convince them to be able to educate the youth and tell them that this is not the way to go, I think they will listen, because they already see them as their role models. I've told you how we have had confessions from people who say they join a particular cult because a particular celebrity is a member of that cult. It still all boils down to us trying to make sure that the kind of energy the cult practitioners demonstrate in carrying out recruits, we have to match that energy with campaign against cultism. So we have to intensify efforts in that regards to handle this thing, so that every child of secondary school age, just like we all know that cultism has been introduced into secondary schools long ago. So this education aspect has to be intensified, because it still remains the very most potent approach, education, to take out the ignorance. And that's why the other aspect is the punitive aspect, the prosecution aspect, which I have to, at this point, also commend the governor of Edo State for matching words with actions. And it has drastically reduced cult incidents in Edo State. I also urge other governors to follow his lead. It will help a lot. Then also, for me, as a patriotic gesture on my part, the book, The Menace of Cultism, I have granted the free copyright permission to public-spirited individuals, because I don't have the capacity to mass produce. If not, I would have done that.
But you didn't bring some for us here.
Okay, sir, I can make that available, sir. I'll make that available. So I am granting free copyright permission to relevant government institutions, NGOs, public-spirited individuals. Of course, NGOs do humanitarian gesture. And there is no humanitarian gesture that can be greater than that which seeks to preserve the sanctity of human life.
Right.
So,
and also the National Orientation Agency.
Yeah, the National Orientation Agency should be funded, should be well funded, so that they can carry out, we can foster a synergy between them, so that they can effectively carry out this campaign.
Okay,
yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Now we'll go to Benin for his last words. Benga James, what's the way forward actually? What do we need to do?
It's, I love this platform and what this platform has given this morning. Various speakers have really done good justice to the subject of conversation. So without having to repeat what anybody had said or even what I had said earlier, I think aggregation of all the thoughts that we have all put across this morning and sifting out what recommendations that each speaker has given. If we can surmise everything together, it will be very instructive. NOA can jump on it. The different agents and agencies for positive change can jump on it. And if this is done with sincerity of purpose and the courage and the political will that it requires, I think we'll be able to curtail, we'll be able to tackle the menace of cultism in Nigeria. And for here in Edo State, this is a parting shot. Yeah, kudos to the governor for job done so far, but it's not yet Uhuru. It must continue. The campaign must continue. It must be deepened. The campaign, there must be more strategies, and it must be deepened, and it has to continue. You see, when abnormality has gone on for more than a year, it becomes a culture. So for us to now uproot it, we also have to make sure that what we are doing that is good must go on and must be sustained, and the new culture will be fostered on the people. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Benga James, Media Executive and Public Affairs Analyst. It was indeed a pleasure to have you as our guest this morning. Thank you so much for all your insights. Of course, Engineer Abdul Audu, FNSC, Chief Lecturer, Department of Mechanical Engineering, Kaduna Polytechnic, former Dean of Student Affairs at Kaduna Polytechnic, former Chairman, Nigerian Society of Engineers, Kaduna Branch, and currently Director, Entrepreneurship Development Center, Kaduna Polytechnic. Thank you so much. I must add the Executive Director of the Igala Education Foundation. Very important, because your Igala sister is here. Thank you for sharing your views with us, and we hope that you continue to do, all that you do in your school, to help those who are already in this very dirty thing called cultism. All right. Also here, thank you very much, Paul Inyabe. Thank you for the book. Thank you for all that you do. Youth advocate, social crusader, and author of the book Menace of Cultism. It was indeed a pleasure to have you. Thank you. And of course, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, Registrar, Bayes University, Abuja. Thank you once again, Prof, for being our guest. We appreciate you, sincerely. All right, so that's our package. Good morning, Nigeria. Stay away from cultism. Remain tuned to the NTA. I'm Ian Ray John.
Indeed, say no to cultism. I am Jomo